But I can move.
Well, no,
I've got a ton of stuff. There's a weird leg, so I put it behind the leg, but it's actually at Margaret's feet when I do that. So if I put it to this side of the leg.
We're going to have Althea will be here. Is that right? How many more seats? Heather said she would be here.
Yeah, but we do something short.
Are the tables different this time?
They're way
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, if you have to.
It's
well,
different every time I walk in here. They have it. It's like
Yeah.
a Tetris.
I think really this one was just pushed in, so it looked like a longer space over here.
Yeah.
People instead of two.
You can push it in. You can push it in there.
Well, are we actually short on
This
seats?
table.
Is that?
And have two people there, two people there. So right, and then we'll.
Oh, we might be short on like one.
Because I was just doing one. because
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like, here's the
like,
way
the
they
legs
are.
are so, that's okay, here, we do this. Hey, no, that's fine, we can share one table.
No,
Okay.
I don't have to take the
Okay.
entire space. There we go. Just trying to stay organized.
No, why did I
cancel?
Oh, it looks like.
Ruth is online.
Oh. Because you all would wait for, I guess, the whole thing. Right? Because
Yes,
who said they were
Uh,
coming?
Michael Musty said that he was.
Yeah, he said no.
Yeah, right, he said.
Right.
We're recording?
It's
It's not important.
Pardon, at your house, yeah.
We have a roll call.
Okay. Rebecca Anderson.
Present.
You know what, I'm going to back up. There are two requirements for attendance here, so if we have physical attendance, that's great. If it's remote attendance, you have to state the reason why physical attendance is not reasonably practical and identify the persons present in the location from which you are participating. So, Heather Barker, Althea Barton, Jill Grant. We have Jill on. There. Michael Konsky, Diane Nolan, here. James O'Rourke.
Here.
Michelle Rohrbacher.
Here.
Marcus Zilek,
Here.
Senator Ruth Ford,
I'm here first, remote.
and is there anyone in the room?
Nope,
And your reason for remote?
it's a long way to drive for, this is the only thing for today.
Representative Dry,
Present.
Representative Petronell.
Here.
If everyone wants to take a few minutes to review the minutes.
Can I interject here?
Sure.
Couple of minutes. I would like to add something to the agenda after the minutes.
Okay,
Just will cause procedural issues.
procedural issues. I have one of those too, so it's good.
Okay.
Take 4 minutes and review the minutes from April. who's completed their review. If any need more time. Are there any amendments to the April minutes?
I think Ms. Nolan did an excellent job.
All right, motion to accept the minutes from April.
Second.
Aye. All in favor?
Uh-huh.
Opposed?
I'm sorry. One of the procedural things is that we actually have to do a roll call for every vote.
Do we have any voting members on Zoom?
No.
I thought that only applied if they voted members.
Well, according to some document that I was reading on the right to know, 91A, you were the secretary before it. I read it that it was a roll call on all votes. I could be wrong, but, that was what
I know when I was secretary, we did it for everyone, but I was remote at the time, so I'm not sure. But if that's what you read,
I was checking these things because of some other issues, but,
Sure, but if you're the secretary, the procedure is your department, so we'll defer to that.
so I'll just call everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. Rebecca Anderson,
Aye.
Althea,
yes.
Diane, yes, James,
Yes.
Michelle Rohracher,
Yes.
Marcus,
Yes,
and that was, Marcus,
accept the minutes.
yeah, motion,
My motion.
and James was the second.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Was that the procedural issue?
There's a little bit more.
Okay,
So, anytime that we're calling roll call, I'm sorry, not roll call, but when we are voting motions, it is my understanding that it does not require a unanimous vote for us to move forward, that it is just a majority vote. And I feel like maybe, last month, we were bantering the names of the EFA versus home ed, and we were talking voting traditional or all those different terms. It seems to me that we were halting the vote and not moving forward, not doing roll call after the first person said, no, I won't.
well, so
I object.
I think what happened last month is. We cast all of those motions as affirmative. And so we were looking for a majority in the affirmative. We didn't get a majority in the affirmative on any of them. So I don't think we were treating it as a unanimous motion, at least that's not how I recall it. But there was only minority support for any one of those name suggestions.
Could I suggest that in that case, it might not really be a motion? It might be, well, what do you think about this one? What do you think about that one? And then it's part of a dialogue. As opposed to making a motion where you do have to follow through. By,
We did call motions on the ones that were in the agenda, the ones that had been brought up previously. But I don't think that we necessarily took a vote on every idea that was floated. You know, if somebody moved to adopt a name, then we did a vote. But we were also not operating, we were operating on a voice vote basis, so the idea of a roll call for each one was not really in effect at that meeting.
So the reason it's really on my mind is because I have to review the videos when I write these minutes. And so as I watched what happened, if you look at like the section where it says, a series of motions on terminology were introduced but failed. The first was to adopt the term independent home educator. You motioned, someone seconded, and then as soon as the first person said, I object, we did not continue the vote. Did not ask everyone in the room what their opinion. That was my interpretation watching the video. I just wanted to guard us against that and make sure that today and moving forward, that we are making sure that every voice is heard and that we're not just saying we're done, you know,
Okay, fair enough.
moving that aside. Another issue that I wanted to talk about was, when the secretary is absent. Under RSA 91A, we have 5 business days to get those minutes out. If I am absent or, if I am absent, it should not be left for me to do when I have not attended the meeting. It is important that the person who is the secretary takes notes and does the roll call, etc. And that they are present. And that's my belief. I didn't read that in the rules. Maybe you have different experience. I don't know. But, in my absence, I would hope that at the beginning of the meeting, it would establish that someone was going to be the secretary and prepare the minutes for that meeting. Is that fair?
How is that handled otherwise in other committees when a secretary is absent?
We're both clerks, so when I'm not there, I'm doing something else, just somebody else in at the table will take the notes for the meeting, but I have to sign off on them.
So is it but is it, understand that the actual assigning of who is going to do the job is the question. So does Marcus say, okay, she's not here, we need someone to become secretary for the meeting, or how does that happen, so that she knows that the part that had to be done got done?
That's usually just a volunteer, whoever's in the room.
We did have that
Unless you have
last
unless you have a hierarchy that somebody moves up and actually does it, like an assistant. Chairman would be vice chairman would become the chair. If there's not lacking that, it's just whoever's. You can talk into doing it.
Okay.
That's the end of your procedural issues?
No, I have one more.
Okay.
The other thing that I've noticed watching the videos again is that we're having a lot of instances where there are people talking over one another. Or cutting off a sentence. It is very difficult to translate the minutes when you can't hear what's actually being said. So I think we all can agree that that would just make it better and easier, and for the public to be able to interpret what's going on. Because the camera is not necessarily catching, so right now it's catching me because I'm speaking, but if there are 2 people speaking, it doesn't catch that other person. Just a point of order kind of issue.
All right, and we all strive to do better on that point.
That's it.
Okay. So, and, I don't know if this is the, section for it, but I'm just gonna say it now. My availability to members, for consultation, discussion outside of meetings, I'm obviously available by email. I'm available by my personal phone. You can call me as an individual. I'm not able to join group meetings with a subset of the council. I'm not going to do that. I know it probably doesn't count as an off the books meeting if it's just 2 members, but I really don't want to get into that. And I don't want to schedule meetings to support my very part-time work here with the council. So just so everybody knows, my personal phone number is available to all of you, and I will I'm happy to accept calls from members of the council, members of the participating organizations, anything related to our business. Or obviously you can address me in email that I'm not able to join secondary meetings or have that kind of business. So.
Well, I think that's a violation of 91A as well, once it's a certain number.
Yes, when it was a quorum. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get into tracking a quorum. I just want to say that, there's basically 2 modes for contacting me, and other members can establish their own policy. You can have a one-on-one phone conversation, which is private and off the record, as citizens we're allowed to do that. Or you can email me at the official email that I use for the council, and so that's an auditable record of the communication, and everything's above board.
One other procedural
Sure.
issue. On other boards that I've served on, if someone sends an email to the whole group you're not supposed to reply all, because that initiates a public meeting without notice.
Hmm.
So when we're responding to you, we should just respond to you back. Yes, I can make it, I'll be there in person, etc. It's not something that's widely known, so I just wanted to let.
So
people
would
know.
that restrict me from the supporting emails where I say, please tell me your attendance to the entire group? I mean, is that running afoul of public meeting law?
I believe you can say that out to the entire group, but each individual should respond just to you.
Okay.
And there should not be back and forth dialogue among the whole group.
Okay. Anybody else have any procedural issues they'd like to discuss while we're on it? All right, moving on, no appointments, resignations. Does anybody have immediate business? If that is no. Updates from Department of Ed.
Oh, I didn't do one last month, so I just wrote a little blurb, just
Okay.
updates on the FAQ. I did get two responses from the council that I printed in case anyone wanted to go over them together. And I did do an initial update on the FAQ, so it's different than the one that I first put out. So you're welcome to take a look at that. I
Okay,
have
we're gonna
lots
take
of-
a minute to read this blurb
Sure.
and see if anybody has any comments.
Are you saying that the FAQ has already been updated in some way?
Yep, it's had an initial update.
Does it have a date attached to it so that we know?
It was from a few days ago, so I.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it may or may not be up to, I've had a question to bring up to you separately because I forgot to send it to you ahead. So it might already.
I have a copy here, Michelle.
Yeah, I would love a copy if you have more than one.
I have one question on the FAQ. And it's related to, I think Michelle Lavelle had sent an email about, high school graduation and, certificates of completion. And on the FAQ, it says when the parent of a child under the age of 18 submits a document to the department, should that be if? Because it's not necessarily required. So when a parent submits it almost implies that it's,
I think it is required if the child is under 18. Yes,
that right?
because
If
they have to
they-
be enrolled in an educational pathway.
If they graduate after.
Oh, okay.
18, then you do nothing.
But do they have to submit,
I think it
There
counts
has
as
to
a
be a
it
termination.
has to go to the department?
It seems like, though it's factual information, it's irrelevant to the diploma question.
I just wanted to make
Yeah,
sure
no,
that,
I mean,
no,
I
that
have
somebody
it circled
wasn't
as a,
reading this thinking that they had to send something to the department.
right,
for
so
the high school.
I had it circled as a question item as well, partly for the concerns that were brought up by Michelle. But also because it doesn't answer the question that's being asked. Will my child receive a diploma? The question response should be, a parent has the legal right to produce a diploma for their child completing a home education program. If that child completes before the compulsory age of 18, then they must submit a notification to the DOE, but that doesn't preclude the parent from producing that diploma. And the thing that the DOE has been providing as a service is not a diploma. So it refers to a document that's still not the question, doesn't answer the question.
You can send me an email and I can.
Okay.
forward it.
Yeah. Thank you. And then the other question I was wondering about is what's the difference between home education and homeschooling? I think that just confuses people further. People that have been home educating since the 90s have used the terms interchangeably. I don't think it's a place that we can make that differentiation for somebody.
Okay.
I don't know. That's just my opinion. Well open for discussion, just reading it as a new person coming in, it might not make any sense to them.
I'm sorry, what page is that one on?
That's on the second page, it's the second one down. What's the difference between
Right.
the home education program and homeschooling?
Yeah.
It almost makes it sound like they're two separate pathways, but they're not. It legally, home education is the one pathway that's defined that we're talking about here. So there isn't. It's like a nickname for home education is homeschooling, and now we're trying to use that nickname somewhere else.
Or just delete the last sentence in that, I think, in that section.
That could be,
That would still answer the question.
yeah,
That
it,
would
it, yeah, it
clear
answers the
up.
question, but I was meaning by assigning homeschooling to could also include EFA pathway. That's where it gets confusing. So yeah, if you eliminate that last sentence, it would fix that.
And I agree that if that question is in there, there really could be a lot more spelling out the differences if you want to go that way. The rights and responsibilities, as we have talked about many times.
Yeah, I would either delete the last sentence there or delete the question altogether.
You complete the question.
Yeah.
Is this something we have to vote on?
I think it's just.
I
The
think no,
recommendation or just
It's feedback.
verbal feedback, right?
If we have more feedback,
I
Email-
don't
email-
support
Yeah, I have,
that last sentence.
Althea's gotten back to me and,
For what it's.
Diane.
I sent in some general comments saying I think it needs to be fleshed out more or explained more. I didn't offer specific language.
If you'd like to, you're welcome to. I'd love to,
Yeah.
I'd love to have more input if you think you're willing to, yeah.
And when we send input, are you just making changes or does it go through a process?
I'd go over with Tim, yeah.
Tim?
Yeah.
Anyway, as far as question 2 on the second page, I would keep the last sentence because without that context, if somebody's completely new to our world, without that context, they may not understand that homeschool, that there's a broader set of practices under the banner of homeschooling. So I would keep the last sentence. What I might do is reword it to say the term homeschooling is sometimes used, or sometimes also used to refer to families who choose. So, rather than treating it like it's any kind of official term, like it includes EFAs, you have to say, make it a comment on usage, out in the public, you will hear this used to also refer to EFA families.
And I would say not all EFA families.
Well, and what we're basically saying here is homeschooling's not a thing, it's a casual term. And not a formal status, and so. You know, it has it is used loosely and may be used to refer to, either of two things.
If you were wanting to keep there's a differentiation between home education and homeschooling. Home education is a legal definition,
Right.
legally defined pathway, whereas homeschooling is a colloquial term.
I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
what they're getting at here, and but I think it's also useful to say. To mention EFAs, to say why, this colloquial term is not just a synonym for home education. It's used more loosely. For the audience that doesn't have that distinction in their awareness.
Right, so for that audience, I don't think this really tells them anything.
Yeah.
I think if we're going to have this, then it should spell it out. This is what home education is, this is what other things that you could call homeschooling might look like.
Mhm.
Or you say what homeschooling is not. You give some examples. Homeschooling is not funded through 194 app.
Okay, the more we have the conversation, I would say eliminate the entire question, but
Yeah.
Okay.
don't muddy the waters. And you're typically somebody looking at an FAQ like this. They don't want to get into the nitty gritty, right? They just want to know that they can do this legally.
I mean, yeah, I think somebody looking at FAQ like this may be looking to home educate their child and want to be familiarized with the terrain through reading the FAQ. So I think introducing the fact that homeschooling is not a legal term, that it may have multiple meanings, I think that's useful in that context. So you imagine somebody, a lot of people know they want to homeschool their children for some particular reason, home educate their children for some particular reason. But have never looked into the legal or procedural details of how that's done until suddenly they've got a 5.5-year-old and they gotta do something, So. Yeah, I think I would keep something in, maybe it needs to be reworked, to really say, this is the question about that term homeschooling. Where we tell you that's not a legal definition, and
I like your
So-
colloquial expression, because that really about sums it up.
But I do agree that acknowledging that the term is used, but that it's not a legal term, it is rather colloquialism.
Right.
Which is not what is defined in statute. It's a good question to ask because people want to know what is home education. Home education is defined in statute. That's a simple answer. But homeschooling is spoken of otherwise in other documents. So to say that it's a non-legal term, it's colloquialism that's used for a broader segment, it's valid to use some sort of differentiation, just using tying it to only, it could also include EFA pathway, it just seems more confusing than not.
I would argue that this question almost should be the first question. Because people are coming thinking, I want to homeschool, they're not thinking I want to home educate,
right,
right? So I want to homeschool without knowing what that means at all.
nobody who's
If we
looking
put
at
it
the
as- If we put
FAQ,
it as the first question, then we can really lay out the differences and zoom them into what is home education, and then the rest of it can be about home education.
You're right, because it talks about the two things that are references, RSA one, what state statute and what is it, And what is, I think you're right, moving that question.
well, yeah, and I would say there's maybe 2 paragraphs to this, there's
Yeah.
paragraph 1, which is. Homeschooling is a colloquial term that applies to multiple things, we should mention EFAs, because that's a distinction people should be aware of, that this is. These are the two pathways that you might hear referred to as homeschooling. A second paragraph to that question should probably be, home education is specifically the pathway of, greatest parental responsibility, least oversight, and no public funding.
If you just direct them right there, home
Yeah.
education program is this thing that.
Right.
and it
What is
explains it,
this?
And it explains it right there.
On the first one.
Oh, is that on the
Yeah.
first page?
Mhm.
I wonder if it's possible for us as a council, and I'm not sure of the answer, maybe Diane, to have a Google Doc that we all put comments on or suggestions on, a shared document, because we're talking about all of this, but it would be pretty, I don't know, Ally, are you comfortable with taking all these comments and
It's helpful if you
making
email,
edits?
yeah, if you email and
I
have
think
it written.
The Google Doc might run us afoul of quorum.
Yeah, I think so. I'm worried about that. So we'll all just have to send you comments and you review them.
That
Yeah.
would be great.
I had a comment on the second to last one as well. Right, since we're supposed to be looking at this whole thing through the lens of home education. Is the phrasing of, is my student eligible for EFA funding if they're enrolled in home education program? And the phrasing of this whole paragraph, to me, could be laid out in a more positive home education way, as opposed to, you can't do home education. If you, in other words, this has a sort of negative tone to it, so.
Yeah, I would almost say
I would
we
suggest
need a
could
question.
Lay it out
that-
in a more positive.
We need the
Yeah.
question that says, what is the difference between a home 193.9, home education and EFAs? It's supposed to be a 193A oriented document, but that question is going to come up in the mind, and it kind of touches on not every answer here, but many of the answers here touch on that without explicitly laying it out. And so I might have a question to basically say, basically the compare contrast, what do we mean when I say these two, these two pathways kind of towards the beginning, not the first, not the first question, but toward the beginning of the FAQ would be my thought.
Especially if we could take the question on the second page and just move it, you already referred to it.
Right.
I just wanted to bring up kind of a technical thing on that same question. This says the home education program must be terminated prior to applying for the EFA, but the statute says a home education program is terminated upon the commencement of participation in an EFA. So those are two different things.
Yeah, that's what we talked about at the very end of the last meeting, right?
Yeah.
And, somebody read from you did. That says it's prior to enrolling. Not applying. So I think if you just changed prior to applying to prior to enrolling,
Uh,
that's what commencement
I would
means,
take it
right?
right from
Yeah,
the
it's-
statute.
yeah.
Yeah, or, yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you're saying the statute does not require the notice of termination at all.
No.
No, it becomes terminated once you take and participate in the EFA program. It's kind of automatically done.
That's what I'm saying, it's not,
Yeah, it's not-
you're
it's not
telling me the
automatic.
statute does not call for the parent to take an active step of notifying.
No, it must
does
be
say next.
terminated prior to commencement. And last week I had read it. or
That's
last
the
meeting I
version I
read it,
have heard
enrollment.
previously, must be terminated prior to commencement, that's what I've always heard.
Okay.
Now you're saying the statute says it
It
is
says-
terminated upon.
A parent shall, no, it says a parent shall provide notification pursuant to 193A5 when a student starts participating in an EFA program, so.
Okay,
So they still have to terminate it, but just before,
contemporaneous
Beginning
with,
Yeah, you start
The EFA.
EFA, and so you have to close the door on the home education part.
I also think that what you were saying, Althea, about, more positive spin on the first sentence, I think it could really change how it sounds if it said, while enrolled in the home education program, students are not eligible for EFA funding.
Hmm.
Instead of saying, like, almost making it sound like if you're enrolled, like, you can never be an EFA student even if you change. It's, none of the words are changing, just the order.
So, I'm gonna interject here. We've gone through about a quarter of our meeting time. The FAQ review and the procedural issue discussion. Our main business for today is review of the annual report. I expect that will take most of the meeting time. I'm going to propose that the continuing business around terminology discussion, I included that in this agenda. Probably not going to spend any time on that. We have at least one member who said they have to leave at 4. So I would like to move on from this. Maybe we can add FAQ review to our next meeting. I'd like to move on to this, so we have at least an hour for review of the annual report, unless anybody objects.
Sorry, you are tabling FAQ review, but what was the proposal for continuing business from last meeting?
So continuing business, I included the terminology discussion that we were having. I'm saying probably we're not going to have time for that today. So
So when are you proposing that we continue
I'm
that
that
business?
both of these be moved to the following meeting.
To meet in June?
To meet in June and to have the FAQ review or a review of whatever version of FAQ we're on at that point. And to pick up the discussion of the terminology.
It seems that those would be the more pressing things, and if we're continuing into June, then the letter would also have the item that could be continued to June.
I was told that we have to review this month because it has to be submitted in the final form in June.
What's the deadline for the letter? Our meeting would be before that deadline, if it's in June, and then or before June 13th, whatever this time is.
We could just go over the annual report, and if there's extra time, then
Okay.
get to the other parts.
That is true. And I think the person who was, said they were leaving at 4 is not here, not here. So are you saying that we should be talking about the annual report right now, or are we going to still do the member report?
I was
in that order?
suggesting with the consent of the members to table the discussion of the FAQ and to also potentially table the continued discussion of terminology. To recognize that we have pressing business to complete during this meeting on the annual report.
I was just, because part of what our member reports include is related to the continuing business for what we were asked last meeting to come back at this meeting with. So that's where I'm confused as to moving that portion of it to a further meeting, since it was part of what we should be reporting at this meeting.
Yeah. Okay. So what would you like to do? We're saying that the review of the annual report is not pressing business for this meeting because we're meeting in the early part of June. That's what I'm being told.
Oh, I think Allison is checking to see what the due date is, but Althea, you have something in.
I was going to incur that this has a deadline.
That's an.
Our other conversations don't have a deadline, so there is, urgency and eagerness to talk about them, but this has a deadline, and I think I believe that we should prioritize this meeting. But I'm free all afternoon, so.
What's gonna happen?
Well, then maybe while Allison's looking for what the deadline is, we can at least read the report
Sure.
and then figure out from there where discussion needs to happen.
I'm sorry, I also think that, I think that we had a pretty good discussion about the FAQs, and maybe the next step is just to send in some comments, right?
Yes, yes, email, much
Um,
easier.
I said what I wanted to say about that.
There is no date in there. No one.
Yeah, I
recalls.
I only bring it up because, I had this as the priority item. For this meeting, and then I'm looking at the clock and seeing that between the unscheduled procedural issue discussion and then the unexpected depth of discussion around updates from DOE, that we were just kind of burning through the clock, so. If everybody would like to review the annual report.
Okay, so we've agreed that the FAQ, we're going to send information to Ally. Any other revisions? She's going to come back with something next month.
Yes.
We can move on to member reports and then plow through as much as we can after the annual report into the terminology. Is that fair?
That sounds good. Legislative reports?
I do have a few. Well, it jumps down to the rulemaking / legislative updates, essentially. I did contact Commissioner Edelblu on ED 704.02 to request that rule change. I'm not sure what got lost in the translation. I looked back at old minutes. I'm not sure if that was ever a formal request that was submitted, so I did send him an email asking that that be taken care of, because this has been on the agenda since before I was on the council. Going down to the current legislation, House Bill 10, which is also SB 72, two different versions of the Parental Bill of Rights. They're both in crossover. The same with House Bill 115 and Senate Bill 295, both universal eligibility for the Education Freedom Account. Those are both in crossover. I assume both of those bills will most likely be going to a committee of conference at some time. You can strike House Bill 66, that was killed in the Senate. 748, the local education freedom account is retained in.
66.
What?
It's not in the minute,
Not in the minutes?
or not in the agenda.
Oh, good, it was struck, okay. 748, was retained in committee. 671 is retained in committee, so if you could add that at the end, so that I don't have to go back and review, that would be awesome for the agenda for the next time. And then 729 is also retained in committee. 716 is also was in the budget. So who knows what's gonna happen with that.
Marcus, we have an answer on the date. The reason no one knows is because there apparently isn't one. There's no
I
actual
wrote
date.
this whole thing and we don't.
There is one every year.
There's no actual date. People's terms expire August 31st, so it's always assumed that they do the report before then.
Okay.
And they didn't usually meet over the summer, so typically May or June. But there's no date in statute anywhere, so.
There may be a meeting date set.
I think June, there is a meeting date, that's the placeholder
And
one.
then it would probably
It
be
would be
their
the-
June meeting, whenever that is. Of
It
June
will
13th.
be-
13th.
That's Army.
That's what we, oh, that's what I thought you were
The
asking.
board of-
No, the,
Oh, there is one in June, it would be the. The 12th, it would be June 12th is the state board. There is no state board in August this year, so.
So we do need to do it this meeting,
By July.
otherwise they won't get it for their.
right,
They have a July meeting.
They have a July meeting, there's no August meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Home Educator Association.
Hold on a second, I don't think we asked Senator Ward or Representative Dry.
Are you done?
Mhm.
I'd be willing to. Well, let me just, I'm here. Right.
Okay.
I'm gonna just say that exactly what I said last month. It's, there's still a trend where home education's being accused of lack of accountability and a lack of transparency. It came up in, floor amendments yesterday, with the, Education Freedom of Parents bill. They're still talking about us, as a whole group that is not non-transparent and non-accountable. I think we really, we do our best to keep saying that we are, but, just to let you know, that's still out there.
What is the expectation of transparency and accountability?
Oh, I think
With
they,
other
they're
people's children
trying to
there.
say that the public schools are completely transparent because when you go through school, a town meeting, a school district meeting, you get all the, accounting, you know, what they've done and they ask questions. But we can't do that. They can't do that to us. For good reason, yeah.
On what basis would they be allowed to do that?
You're laughing and I'm laughing too, but this is what we're fighting all the time. This is the idea that we're against, that, yes, there is transparency. It's not to you, you know.
Right.
And there is accountability. It is not to you. And that when you point out that we do have standards that we have to uphold, you know, that I think they understand that, but they don't act like that's an understanding.
They don't like the answer.
Well, that's,
Is it all new and all because there are people getting money now?
no.
Okay, it's always been like this.
I'd call it the democratic talking points. Especially on the education.
You
thing, that those-
need to attack the underlying assumptions of that. You know, I don't want to give them an answer as to in what way am I accountable, or in what way is my raising of my own children transparent to them, members of the public who have no right to know. I don't accept that frame at all, and I think the essence of the home education right is that the public does not have authority over other people's children. It's not an intrinsic function of government to determine how people may raise their own children. So I reject that frame entirely, and the fact that we have to do some administrative work with the state to satisfy their truancy laws is unfortunate, but you know, an understood consequence. But no, I would never, you know, in a legislative context, adopt that frame and then try to say, oh, no, we really are accountable. Oh, no, we really are transparent. The demand for transparency and accountability is itself offensive, totalitarian, unacceptable.
Which is
Well,
what we're
the
always
parents
trying
are
to do.
ultimately
Yeah.
accountable. That's always
Right.
the
And again, that's
argument.
not an
Yes.
answer that they like, that's all.
Right.
That's, and so, just saying, we're still fighting the same battles.
Absolutely, absolutely. And obviously, as we've said many times, the EFA situation makes it worse, but it's not like it isn't something you didn't hear 10 years ago, you know.
Or 30.
So 30 years ago, I didn't hear it 30 years ago.
or
Do I have
35.
do I have a chance for a comment?
Absolutely.
I think the accountability has to do with a lot of the people feel that they are not strict enough with the income level. They think that a lot of people go above the income level and that is not being accountable. Then the other thing that is out there is that all the money that goes to the EFAs affects the property taxes, which is not true. None of the property taxes goes to support the EFA programs. And back to the 295, I've heard that it passed the House and is going to finance, and the change that the House made, I think is gonna be okay. I don't think there's gonna be an issue with it.
295, you said?
Was 295 is the House bill, and it goes with what, 115 is the House and 295 is the Senate bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a small change. It's what triggers the EFAs and that's, I don't believe that that's gonna be a problem. It's not gonna go to committee or conference because of that.
Okay.
Can I make a comment, Marcus? The fact that income is involved in a conversation about what home education does is inappropriate. Home
Right.
education has no income requirements in the state of New Hampshire.
Right.
I'm in
We try
trouble.
to keep those two parts very different.
So it brings up the question of, in those conversations, is there a difference? Is the difference delineated? Are people saying, we don't trust, or there's a lack of accountability and transparency from homeschoolers, and we're lumped in with homeschoolers? Is it,
Yes,
there's a
I
lack
think-
of transparency and accountability from home educators? What is
I don't
that?
think the home educators are not singled out. It's just the program they feel is not accountable. They don't know for sure that it's actually working the way it's supposed to work. And also another big issue is how do we know that those children using EFAs are being educated? And that's what I think some of the vignettes that you have at the end of your agenda here about all the success stories, it really should be publicized.
Because we're hearing the other side of it. I knew a homeschooling family that, and that's what we're trying to
Right.
work against all the time.
Right,
Sorry, I interrupted.
but Senator Ward is still contending that this is referring to home education, and it's not. This is discussion referring to EFA families.
Right.
People are looking for transparency on EFA families and EFA families that choose to use their funds to do school at home. That is not what we are here in this council. We are 193A, and it has nothing to do with transparency, funding, or anything of that sort. And that's
Except,
the distinction we're making sure that everyone in Concord understands.
Well, so I would like to hear
And
from
I
the
agree.
legislative members. I think we all understand that the financial transparency doesn't apply to 193A. Is what you're reporting that in the legislative debate, that there is an equivocation being made of where the funding issue is being used to that funding transparency is being used to call into question 193A, because is that the messaging?
yeah,
Or,
I believe we are all painted with the same brush. Anybody whose children are home during the day, to them, is something that's a black box, and they don't like it. All right, so looking at a family who's out during the daytime, you go, I think I know what they do for education. But you can't tell by looking at them whether they take EFA money or not. And that's what the general public and the general legislature is looking at, saying, I don't understand that there's a difference. But I know that neither one of them is, in my, they don't do a public accountability or transparency. That's the thing that's what we're trying to draw a line and say, because it's not supposed to be transparent and accountable to you. And that's the fight that's been going on. There is no distinction in their mind, and I think you back me up on that.
And both arms of education, we consider the parent the ultimate accountability, the ultimate form of accountability. And that's where it breaks down, because we are focused on the parents having the duty to educate their kids. And the funding source is a separate
And
conversation.
to be fair,
but-
they kind of pay private schools the same way,
Mhm.
because they're not held out at a town meeting and all their things are shared, and they say, how do you contribute success? And we go, because the parents keep sending them there and paying, for the money, to do that.
Yeah.
But, because the parents are the ultimate arbitrators of this, whether this is successful or not. That's a very hard concept for some people to
It's
understand.
a very frustrating debate, because we all know that private schools and home education consistently outperform public schools at every, adjusting for every possible factor. So, yeah, that is a frustrating conversation to have.
It's not a new argument, it's just complicated.
It
by the
is,
Current
yeah.
state of
But,
education in New Hampshire, so.
well, everywhere. So, my question to the legislators is there any hope of restructuring the EFA program? Not obviously in the current term or in the near term, but, I was surprised. I think was it the Monitor piece or something that came out talking about controversy within you know, home education
Okay,
and EFAs. And they quoted some very small number, a few hundred or 1,000, you know, home-based EFA families that they were aware of. And, you know, I was thinking it was a much more popular application of EFAs than apparently it is. Is there, you know, do we have any hope of maybe just clawing it back and limiting EFAs to private schools? I mean, it is not a large number of people who are taking this money, who are causing class wallet issues, who are causing the legislative and political issues for home educators. You know, I can't personally argue with the notion that if you know, if the government's writing a check for schooling services, that they don't deserve some level of scrutiny over what's happening. Is there any hope of that? Is there any hope of modifying the EFAs, especially, you know, now that it's you know, universal, or it's going to be? I think the overwhelming majority of people who take that are going to use them as vouchers for private schools. They're not going to be using them at home. And this tiny remnant of people who are using EFAs to buy home instruction materials or whatever, seem to be causing a problem.
Those are great questions. I'm gonna say, I think that it is, in some ways, if it helps people keep their kids at home and do it, that's a good thing. If this is the way to do it, I'm not sure. We're kind of backing into this because we were here, home education was here and kind of got grafted into this rather than extending it of our own volition. So it is hard. I don't think the numbers are gonna make a difference. We're trying not to make the numbers be a difference. It's just the philosophy and the policy. It doesn't matter how many people do it, whether it's just what do we do for the policy if it's done at all. I don't know, because we were not in office when this took effect. We're playing catch up ball ourselves on these things. Perhaps Senator Ward might be a good person to ask because she was there from the beginning, but I just gotta say, what we have to make sure is that we don't want, please don't use the term voucher. It's not a voucher at all. It has nothing to do with vouchers. And
There's another subtle legal distinction that I'm going to have to become deeply educated on, isn't it?
if educators die.
We're saying it that way.
That's the way-
It's the same issue of semantics. that
If you
we're dealing
Google,
with here.
if you Google vouchers in New Hampshire, it will send you right to the expired and it was expunged in 1988. Okay, so that both, there was a voucher program, it's gone, it's dead. And vouchers, you know, are for a certain thing, for a certain amount. Where a class wallet is an amount and you decide the certain things. So I think what we really need to define is, what does public mean? Because as soon as you say that this is the talking point, you're taking public money, so you have to be accountable to the public. And my personal philosophy is there comes a point where that class wallet thing, there's a decision that I make that no one else influences. Got the list of vendors, got the list of things you can buy, but my decisions in here are not dictated by anybody but me. And so is that my money or is that public money? Because public isn't influencing what I'm spending it on. So we got to decide what does public mean and what access does it get somebody there? So this is a long and bigger thing than maybe just not applying education.
Well, you know, if we could somehow restrict, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it is relevant to Marcus's suggestion of pulling home education out of the EFA program. Home educators had access to the education tax credit scholarship prior to the initiation of the EFA.
Correct.
The better mechanism for home educators to remain home educators would be to have home educators participating in the education tax credit scholarship, because really when you are receiving money to do what you want still, it's a tax credit, it's a scholarship.
Yeah.
And that's how in their minds they're viewing it. They're
Mm.
not seeing it as this is public education money. In the discussions that we had over the last month in our various groups, it was very clear that they still do not view themselves as receiving public money.
The ETC,
No, the EFA
Okay.
families do not.
Okay.
ETC is not public money,
right,
but that would be the appropriate mechanism for the families that want to home educate to receive funds to do so beyond their means, and it already had income requirements, it already had everything in place. So all of those families that are currently under the EFA in home education would be under the ETC in home education and still retain their legal definitions and protections.
I agree, that would make it much cleaner.
Is it that there's political resistance to vouchers as a concept, which is what forces us to add this superstructure? Rather than say the EFA grant is a coupon to some education, to provide some education provider for whatever it is, 5,000 a year. You know, is it resistance to vouchers as a concept that we have to complicate it? And make it work, you know, make it to. The grant goes to the parent decides where to send it and they split it up and why? Because the state already scrutinizes private schools to some extent, right? They still get accredited and monitored and all of that.
Well, if you go through the filter of it belongs to the parent at a certain point, then going to a religious school is not the problem that it would be if you just said, we're giving vouchers to religious schools. People have a very hard time with that, even in spite of Supreme Court rulings. So
So this is like sort of specifically to allow people to use EFAs for parochial schools.
it's one of the possibilities.
I missed, what is the possibility?
Using EFA money to go to a parochial school
Yes.
or a religious school.
Yeah, but I think that has been already decided that if you give it to regular school, the child, you can take it anywhere. And there are a couple of, I guess, Supreme Court cases with Espinosa versus whatever, that really has decided that it's perfectly fine to do that.
And we know that, and people should know that, but that's still the battle we're still fighting. That this is religious people have.
We just have to keep telling them over and over again. Marcus, I have a thing for you. Do you have some ideas about the EFA program if we could tweak it? Why don't you write down some of the ideas that you have? Because as far as I'm concerned, no program is ever perfect. You do what you can do at the very beginning, but doesn't mean that it can't be changed or tweaked or something. So if you have some good idea, just write it down and send it to me and I'll take it from there.
Okay. Yeah, I complained we were burning the clock and we continue to burn the clock, so.
Okay, but it's very good discussion. This is good.
I had one other comment, and that is that it's that I would hope that my representatives and the representatives here who are part of the HEAC would be every time this question of accountability and transparency comes up, clarifying. I mean, this is the education committee, right?
Yeah.
So they're
And-
educated people, they understand. I think they would be able to understand. I don't think we can really blame it on one party or another, or, dynamics. It seems to me that, that there should be a clear delineation when those conversations are having between 194F and 193.
I would say I
We
always
do.
differentiate.
We always do.
Yeah.
Yep, and it's on the education funding committee, there are a few people as well. We have a little bit more knowledge of the home education part of it, but there are people who are just talking about the whole EFA section.
And you're talking about 424 people with various personal educational experiences, and everyone relies on what they knew growing up. And I mean, we all know, if we've done it, that it's kind of scary to be an independent homeschooler. So that concept that we're accountable, even when you're in the act of home educating your own kids, is scary, because you're like, oh, I'm accountable, right? So that concept out in the community is.
Well,
It
it's.
boggles a lot of minds, you know, so it's normal to us,
I
but
don't
not
lose
to
any
everybody
sleep over
else.
my own children
So.
actually becoming educated. What concerns me is the cacophony of publicly held, oftentimes nonsensical opinions about how my children should be educated. So, it's not accountability per se. It's the fact that I would say, at least 60% of those 400 and whatever, people are people who I would disagree with on what constitutes a quality education. And I think that probably applies to most people here.
So our interest is really protecting that.
Yeah.
Right. So. Home Educator Association representative reports. Do we have any?
I have nothing to report.
I only had one small thing, record keeping issue, took the opportunity to send a link to the laws so that the individual was familiar with where they could find their own answers, make sure that they were complying, and they were surprised that there was such a thing.
Grand Granite State doesn't have a report. As far as I know.
My own report for Christian, Christian educators is, partly, I participated in an event that was hosted by Granite State, last weekend, just out in the community, with, who was there as well.
It's the one I mentioned last
Yes,
month.
the
Yes.
curriculum Picks and Pans event. And based on some conversation that has been going around a lot, it seems to be this time of year, people wonder, how do I prove that my child graduated? As part of that, I took the opportunity to bring the transcripts of my two that have graduated and one of their diplomas, and people were shocked that you can write your own. It is just completely foreign concept because they've been told this is what's supposed to be on it, and they're wondering, but how do you know how do you know what to weight it? Well, there's lots of opinions on how you know what to weight things for. So it was a really good opportunity just to have that out in the community to say, the requirements that are on you are what are delineated in statute. How you work out those requirements is your own, and you are creating this transcript as a resume for your child and what their pursuits and ambitions are in post-secondary ed. And that was just a lot of relief, I think, to many, especially in light of, well, what am I supposed to turn into somebody to prove that my kid graduated? There's nobody to turn it into. We're outside of that system. So that was just a personal experience that happened, and just being out and about and within the community. The other stuff that I have is regarding the standardized terminology that we were asked to discuss.
Yeah, there was some discussion in Granite State about that. I don't know what we're going to today.
I am still not on the member reports agenda,
Oh,
and Mrs. has and still is, so that section's probably just been copy pasted for a few months.
yes.
But I don't.
So are you,
She should be in B.
you should be in B,
B,
not in
yeah.
C. Okay.
Yeah, but I don't have, the only thing I have to report is that the event that I mentioned last month was a big success. Michelle was there. There was a whole lot of brand new faces with little 5 and 6 year olds getting ready to homeschool, who wanted to see curriculum and ask questions and talk to people, and no one was talking about EFA or money or anything. Everyone just wanted to see what it was like to homeschool, so to home educate.
Proceeds, Mr. Kosky.
He's-
He's not here. Okay. Mr. Rourke.
So I was having it's ironic, we've had this conversation about EFA and 193A, 194F, and I was having a conversation with a handful of high school principals, and the conversation came up about homeschooling, and it was really generally based homeschooling, and I took the opportunity to try to explain what 93A and what 194F means, and the conversation we had last time when I mentioned the SAT and potential classes, who we should be charging, and who we shouldn't, this, that, and the other thing. And one of the principals said, how would I know who's 193A and 194F? Short of saying, Marcus, you're in my community and you want your daughter to take a class, but are you 194F or 193, which I think is inappropriate to ask.
Right.
How would we know? How would, you know, I don't know if there's anything in the DOE where we call the DOE and say, I have 15 kids in my community, can you?
But
And I-
the facial tattoos are increasingly
So it's like, but it was, I thought it was a good question, but I couldn't answer it. I was like,
I don't think
they're like, aren't you on the committee? I'm like, doesn't.
I believe you
I don't think it's an
have a
offensive question to
SACID
ask.
number,
Okay.
don't they?
It is.
What's
EFA
that?
SACID
has
number is the
SACID
difference.
numbers.
EFA has SACID, we don't.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I think if your student has been in public school, they would still be in that system.
Yeah.
So it's not perfect, but if they have a SACID number, that's
Right.
a clue maybe.
I have a question with that, though. I don't know how you look up those numbers when somebody's coming in or not, but somewhere buried in something is that cash credit scholarship families are issued SACID numbers.
I don't.
Also, if you take the SAT out of school, you have a SACID number.
So
No,
there's so.
Yeah.
If you take the
Here.
SAT, if you take the SAT as an EFA student, does that have to be reported to is the district? Because if you're a public school student, your school is on the distribution, the notification list
Yeah.
for your.
My
testing.
understanding, I think I know, my understanding is, because we have homeschooling students that do take the SAT with us,
Right,
but their score doesn't count towards our combined score for us
right.
in our school.
But what I'm saying, if the EFA students if that score is required to be reported, that would be the way to tell, like, usually there's, I think there's a part on the form where you state, to whom the scores are to be distributed, right?
I would suggest that it's absolutely appropriate to ask. I mean, they're public school students if they're accepting EFA, right? So, I mean, I almost think it's imperative to ask, because that's how you're determining what services to give them or whether to allow them into co-curricular.
I question whether you're ever going to have.
Whether to let them into your, you know, the
Right.
schools.
And I almost
offerings.
wonder if we should be providing any student that's going, any parent who requests or lets us know we're gonna be pulling the homeschool, if we provide them with something that explains the differences between the two, like,
Maybe.
I don't know if, like, in my district, I don't think any parent is going to the DOE website and looking at frequently asked questions that are
You
pulled
could
from
direct them to,
homeschool,
though.
you know what I mean? So I wonder if, and then maybe that gives us a kind of relationship to be able, I mean, most students that leave to go to homeschooling, I've already got a relationship with those families and stuff, that's pretty easy. But it was a great question, like, I didn't know when you're.
I don't think you're ever going to have the kind of like a criminal background check or a setting up a bank account. You're never going to have like hard verification
Right,
that somebody is not an EFA student trying to get a free SAT. And you
right,
might
right, right.
just have to eat a certain amount of unjustified expense from that.
So a point of discussion though is relevant. It's not just about the SAT. They're
Right.
taking equal access in all
Right.
forms.
If they're
Right.
taking EFA
So-
funds and they wanna take classes,
Right.
we should
And
be
they're
charging,
Charging them.
we should be
Exactly.
charging. them.
Because as
Exactly.
a taxpayer in my town, I don't want somebody that's receiving an EFA to be taking equal access because I'm paying for them twice.
Right,
And that's part of it.
that's part of the question that was brought up, like, how do I, if I
And you-
have,
you can
and then
ask-
we gotta do, I went through all my policies for my district, we have no policy on this. We have no policy on what we would
So-
charge for a class.
I would suggest that you call the Children's Scholarship
Okay.
Foundation and get the answer to that.
Okay.
Because it is something we've been discussing is how do you prorate for like one class at the public school?
Right.
They're not public school students. So, you know, it's,
Yeah, I misspoke. but-
yeah, so maybe that's a good place to start.
But I guess the right place to home that information is in your equal access policy. Because your equal access policy determines anybody that's not an enrolled student, how they access the school.
We have that,
So that's the appropriate mechanism to place this, though, to say, in participating under equal access, this is the terms for home education. This is the terms for if you're not a home educator, you have X, Y, Z requirements because you're not under the same equal access.
Right.
You don't have equal access. If you want to participate in the district, you have to use a different mechanism, which is à la carte public school.
Can CSF produce a list of enrolled EFA recipients by district?
I,
and report that automatically. I mean, that seems like the way it should be done.
I don't know. You can,
Is that in the code?
I thought it was a public.
I have listened. I would say call the.
Cause I think a lot of the principals that I talked to, and this is gonna be a topic that I'm gonna bring up in a principals thing, cause I think more, cause after my conversation with the 7 other people I had, there was no difference. Until I started explaining it and started to make sense to them, and some of them started looking at the different things up at that time, like, we probably need to know this stuff. Cause there are some other towns and cities of these principals that have probably 60 or 70 students that don't come to school, that are either home educated or homeschooled, that, and they're like, oh, I better dig into this a little more, and I'm guessing their policies are probably gonna have some stuff on there as well. That's not on there.
Sounds like a perfect add-in to the training package.
Yeah, it doesn't seem inappropriate or strange at all to say, oh, you know, you're coming here, you want to do a class at the school. Okay, I need to ask you, are you home educated or are you receiving EFA funds? Because there's two different ways we have to do this, and if you, I mean, you could ask for proof, right? They could bring in their letter that they received from their letter of intent. Or they could bring in whatever I'm sure when you sign up for the EFAs, you get some paperwork.
Right.
I think though, more than just asking, they need to attest it. In the discussion, there was other discussion that happened within the talking about what to call each of our pathways. And part of that was, it came out that some, even within the community that we interact with that participates in the EFA, is that they believe that there are families that participate in the EFA that don't actually read the information that they're presented. They don't actually know what they're signing up for.
Right.
They sign up for it. So even to say, well, do you homeschool? Oh yeah, homeschool. They're still going to answer the question wrong.
Right.
Even if you ask them point blank. But an attestation, I participate in this program. I participate in this program.
They should know if you say, do you receive EFA funds?
Yes.
They should know.
Exactly. Right,
Yeah.
that should be simply ask that question. Do you homeschool? No, don't ask, do you homeschool? Do you receive EFA funds?
Yeah.
Okay, and now you triage it off to the other side.
Right.
And I
We
agree
are-
about asking you, right?
Yeah.
Have to move it along.
Yeah.
We're getting down to maybe a half hour to talk about our main sort of business, which has to be completed
Thank you.
today. So,
It didn't have to be completed,
we determined it did.
but you determined that, no,
The
This is
The
in
State
July.
Board of Education meets before our date.
they meet in July.
No, we need July.
All right,
Did we confirm that?
They have a July, they do not have an August this
They
year.
have a June meeting and a July meeting. We don't know when they're gonna be meeting to talk about this, and sometimes often they meet in June to talk about this, right? They put it on the agenda. I don't know what that process is like, so I feel some urgency. I want to commend you though, for your
If there's-
efforts, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, if there's a chance we don't have a June meeting.
Right.
It matters right now.
yeah, I mean, the thing is, I feel like every discussion we've had up to this point is a discussion we have every month that we can't have every month. That these are broad discussions about policy and how to communicate with the public and, you know, maybe political, actions in the future. There is no particular timeliness to any of the things that we've spent the last, almost 2 hours discussing. Almost hour and a half discussing, so, I'm sorry our standard agenda is set up this way where, actually new business comes after so many items, but, I really would like to get to the one thing that has calendar impact.
We can change that next time.
I can, yeah, usually we kind of click through it, this has been a little unusual this month. Ms. Barker? Any report?
Everyone else is all set.
Everyone else is all set?
Yeah.
Okay, new business. I'm gonna take a few minutes to review the annual report. Excuse myself, I'll be right back.
Since everyone received the report before the meeting, can we potentially have a discussion, you know, and I'm not making a motion or doing anything like that, about how best to get through this? In other words, are we going to all each provide our feedback without discussion on that feedback? Are we all going to email that feedback? Can we get,
Could we
Any
go
kind of-
through it like paragraph by paragraph and say, does anyone have
Yeah.
anything to talk about with this paragraph? Next.
and additional items to add?
I've never seen one of these reports before, so I don't have anything to compare.
I
I'm
haven't
sure
seen
it's
I
really
went, I just went on the website to go look at the past annual reports. And for the record, the one from 23 to 24 is not on there. It's listed, but
It's not.
there's no link.
Oh, interesting.
But the one from 22 to 23 is actually pretty similar to this.
It is
And there's a paragraph on here that I might edit.
verbatim,
Yeah,
yes,
pretty much. Okay.
yes. I do have a copy of the 21, the 22, and the 23 here, if anyone needs to look at them, and if anyone wants me to, take a picture and send it over so that you can be reviewing it at the same time. There are some good samples of information in these reports, and I think that that's how he started his process.
That's what I would have done. I mean,
Exactly.
why recreate the wheel if you don't have to?
Right. The other thing,
Or
I would
AI.
suggest while we're waiting for him to get back, is, if we could look at the rules and roles of HEAC. I think it's the last one of his, yeah,
Mhm.
okay. Because I think it's pertinent to what goes into this report and what doesn't. Down at the bottom of the second page, the duties of the council. If you just review that, I would suggest. Save some time.
This is on page 5.
On page 2 of his report,
Oh,
on, where it says establishment of HEAC is at the top of the page, down the second half says the duties of the council.
So that was all copied from prior year report.
Yes, I was just suggesting that everyone read that, because that impacts what should and shouldn't go in this report.
Okay.
You want to go on paragraph by paragraph or commentary?
Yeah, well, sure.
May I interject one thing, and that is that you're a relatively new chair.
Mhm.
We have several new members. I feel like we threw you into the deep end a little bit on
A
this,
bit.
so I want to just say that, you know, it's not an easy thing to do if you've never done it before. And if you've never really been through the process with other, you know, on other years. So I appreciate your efforts and
All right, so we're gonna go paragraph by paragraph. Anybody, and I'm going to say paragraph by paragraph. For the first page, second page is not our content, it's just statute. The third page, I'm going to ask the DOE to insert their current roster there. Once we've approved really, it's the text of the first page that is the variable content here. First paragraph comment?
The only question I have is, we have Department of Education, DOE in there, and they refer to themselves as the NHED now, and I wonder if we should be consistent with that language,
Okay.
New Hampshire Education Department. I don't know if,
I agree. I've seen that even when I'm writing my minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to change all references to DOE to that, so we don't need to mention it in future paragraphs.
Just be patient when we refer to them as the DOE.
It's.
Our emails,
right?
I still do it myself once in a while and. Correct it all.
Is it capital NH and then lowercase ed?
Capital
No,
H, capital ED.
All caps, okay.
I know that little lowercase o was
Yeah,
driving me a
yeah.
little crazy.
And what about, when it says home education throughout this document, should that be capitalized as it is like in the FAQ on the website?
Was I
The home
inconsistent about that? Because I didn't think,
No, it's all lowercase.
when I'm saying the name of the council, I
Right.
capitalize it, otherwise I don't.
But even if this says what is a home education under
School.
RSA 193A,
Actually,
It's
at the end.
I know, home education program, so in here, it's always capitalized when it says home education. So here, if it says an understanding of home education, I think
what
that's
it
like
does
a
in
formal term.
It is a proper noun.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Does everyone?
I agree.
That
I'm gonna roll.
you could capitalize home education, you should probably say home education program then.
I think-
Well, home
The
education
term of
is the
program,
title,
yeah.
it is the
term-
title of the
the
chapter, so
Legal definition.
you notice you say homeschool community up above
In
it,
the first sentence.
yeah.
It should probably say home
Home
education.
education.
That's in
Yes,
past reports like
absolutely,
that.
with all the issues.
So that one would be lowercase.
No, to
Because-
change it to homeschool instead of, to change it to home
Right,
education.
But that would be a good
Instead of-
example of where it should be lowercase, because it's not saying
No.
the RSA home education. It's saying the home education community. The community. It's like an adjective. That's what I would do. But when it
Tell
says,
you're a home educator.
but when it says promote an understanding of home education, that's where it would be capitalized to say, we're talking about this
The
RSA.
thing.
So lowercase for community. Uppercase for home, for the second reference,
Mhm.
home education.
Right, because we don't capitalize education community in the next line there, so.
On the last sentence, is it relevant to say the commissioner attended the meetings? And we listened to our thoughts, the representatives, senators. And the commissioner?
Is in the second.
No, the first paragraph,
Paragraph.
last sentence.
I think it's notable that he attended because in my years here, he's,
He attended once for
Rarely
20 minutes
attended.
last year.
you know. So, important to know.
Second paragraph.
I would suggest that the second paragraph be struck because nothing happened with that in this school year.
Okay, so there was a paragraph referring to rule work in previous years, so I left that in as a standard, like.
It was,
Even that, because those are continuing, there's been no conclusion, but they're continuing those are continuingly open questions. So I felt that it belonged in the place where we normally discuss rule changes in the annual report.
I think it might need to say, instead of the HEAC worked with the DOE throughout the year, we didn't really work with it, then we're just waiting for them to respond, so it would need to be changed.
Anticipated,
Or was available to.
was it, sure,
Yeah.
Was available,
that's a much better way,
okay.
Try to stay positive.
yes.
All right, so I'll rework that. Third paragraph,
In the second paragraph, the second sentence. I think we'll talk about this later, but I think that this encompasses a lot of the work that we've done in one sentence that doesn't, and it should really be expanded on, because that's kind of the meat, that's the meat of what we've done is what it says in the second sentence. So if we could just note that, and then add some.
I believe that that should be expanded significantly based on, other comments, but I'll hold that. I think that you could have an entire section that to address the increase in, participation, communication with the public, that we've added meetings, we've had a lot of exchanges, a lot of letters. I think that that is the meat of what we've been about this year. And that should be some section potentially.
so that's kind of what I was trying to do with paragraph 3. I'm thinking paragraph 2, as the specifically, we sit here and consult with the NHED rep. And paragraph 3 being the larger community support role as organizations and as council.
Can I suggest that we, see some changes to paragraph 3?
Sure.
It's verbatim from the 23 report. Do we have any examples we could throw in?
I
It's in
would
the
say,
next paragraph.
The last sentence, the fruits of participation on this council can also be seen in other participating stakeholders. I assume you mean like Mr. O'Rourke's organization, Jill's organization, the other organizations of the members.
It is verbatim from the 2023 report. I mean, I guess my thinking on this is that, you know, we're not. The NHED is not signing our paychecks. We don't like owe them an accounting for the work we're doing. So it's kind of a standard. It's just kind of a standard part of the report to say, yes. We as activists are involved in community organizations are continuing to do this vague work that we're not accountable to you for. It's just, this is what occupants are talking. You know, if you want to turn it into a list of our accomplishments, you know, what have you done, you know, 5 bullet points you've done last week, that kind of thing, we can do that. But I wasn't thinking of that being so much important as to say what as the section, you know, toward the end, you know, what in particular has been significant this year. What roles and activities are we doing, that sort of thing.
I think it's a relevant time though to describe what was asked, to say that clarification was made to our member groups.
Mhm.
That they didn't understand how to differentiate, how to be making sure that they are coming back to represent as 193A, how they are interfacing with their respective groups and understanding what HEAC is to them.
Mhm.
So I think that that was an important definition that we got to. Like Jill had said, she has no idea what she's supposed to do here. She has no idea how she's supposed to interact with us, with her community. And that was something that we fleshed out. And also the work that's understood to need to be done by Mr. O'Rourke and Ms. Barker about creating those procedures and documents that are relevant to what we're trying to do, which is keep 193A as isolated as possible.
Right, so that's why I put the entire EFA issue toward the end, because this is, as far as what content wise we've engaged with this year, it's going to be, what questions have you fielded? It's going to be the same questions you fielded for 20 years, plus a million questions about EFAs. Like, that's what this year's looked like. As far as what has been discussed here, it's been the same issues that have been there to be discussed about homeschooling since time immemorial, and then 75% discussion around EFAs and the distinction and like, that's really, it's when you get to paragraph 5 that we're no longer in the standard, yes, we're the HEAC, we do these things, and we're now saying, what was peculiar about the 2024-25 year, what in particular happened this year? And so you want to kind of mix that into the other sections, that's fine, but.
Would that part work in the sense that the future participation on the council can be seen in other participation stakeholders, including example? How to
The training.
how to work with,
Right.
make sure that other agencies like principals understand how we interface.
Right, because I think that's very, very important work that we've done in the past year. And I don't want to gloss over that. I think that's like a critical part of what we do. So it may not. I
Especially,
think it's important to outline it.
Including training and guidance for principals and administrators.
I have a
especially
question for you. This is only my 9th year on this council, and I was appointed to the Home Education Advisory Council. Never came up that there are 2 different kinds of home educators. You had the 193As and the 194Fs. And you say here in the paragraph that the 194Fs have a different council, a different group. I'd like to know what that one is, because I am unaware of it.
She's in paragraph
from
5.
what I understand, they have never met, but they can meet if they decide to. The 194F
And I think it's been
Does-
published in the media. for
does
sure.
have a council that will
What is it
meet.
called? What is it called?
HEAC.
An advisory, it's an advisory commission, and it's parents of
Yes,
EFA
it's on the
students.
website.
on the children's.
Parents.
Yes.
Well, I'm looking at the
Education Service
statute.
Provider Advisory Commission.
Established in statute.
There are parents' pictures, there are
What,
pictures of
if
the
somebody knows, would you please let me know, because I'm very curious.
I think it said Education Service Provider Commission,
As parent and educator.
Parent and Educator.
Education Service Provider Advisory Commission.
That's,
Okay, is that the one that we had to cut down the number of people on it because there were just too many representing all kinds of different places?
No, it just has 7 members.
Okay, I'll talk to you, Margaret, we'll figure it out.
Okay.
Because I remember there was some advisory council, but they had too many people on it who wanted to advise the people who were running it, and the parents didn't like it. So we got rid of some of them. So, okay, I'll look into it.
Special, yeah, that was a special one.
Going back to paragraph 3, I would say a small edit on the sentence that starts with participation.
okay,
If you say keeps everyone as well as its other members, instead of up to date on the changes, informed regarding home education, capital home education law and rules. Because I don't think there's been a lot of changes in the law and rules, but a lot of what we have been doing is helping people understand the existing law.
so just strike the changes, up to date on home education laws.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Mm.
but
Not take out.
even up to date sounds like things have been changing recently.
Well, we're keeping the people up
Members
to
informed
date, informed,
Yeah.
Informed of home education law.
Mhm.
informed.
Are we adding an example? Like per se, the training of the,
Well, I was just going to sort of generally gesture at training and guidance provided to public school principals and administrators, rather
Yeah.
than,
somewhere in this paragraph.
yeah, rather than like what exactly that entails, but that was gonna be, part of that last sentence, the fruits of participation, including training guidance, yeah.
Excellent.
In paragraph 4,
I am,
does anyone have anything?
We're down to 3.
why,
Oh, sorry, 4, sorry.
yeah, we started bouncing back and forth as people bring things up, but yeah, I'm thinking we're in 4.
I think paragraph 4 should be paragraph 2.
I see no reason why it shouldn't be.
That's pretty significant information.
Thank you.
I would even add in that paragraph that we've seen an increase even in the participation. And the contributions from the public and the interaction with the public. And we have more members this year than we've had in a couple of years. And we've had more
So
meetings.
basically, we need a third sentence that says, the HEAC itself has experienced proportional increase in public comment, participation, and membership.
Improves membership.
Membership,
And
frequency of meetings.
Yeah.
And we
It's
got another
such a weird thing
representative
to report.
from education
But it's
experience.
relevant because it's different from the previous.
We've experienced an increase in meetings as if it's a thing happening to us rather than. something.
The two people are actively engaged.
Yeah,
and
it
the
responds.
public is
Yeah.
engaged
And since we are going to be receiving a new commissioner, it's relevant for that person to be on the footing to know that we are a relevant council.
And that the previous commissioners set a precedent of coming to the meeting.
There you go.
We granted our annual audience to the commissioner. Comments.
I think our relationship with the Board of Education is very important. And so this is our statement once a year. To tell them what we're doing, so.
Paragraph 5.
Adding the issue, in between the issue of EFAs, the issue of EFAs, being conflated, or the issue of being conflated with EFAs. Is what is
The issue of.
So here's what I was looking at.
Separation from
Yeah.
EFAs.
Here's what I was looking at. I'm trying to characterize the year as a whole. The first half of the year, we were addressing questions of EFAs here in the commission, the council.
Did you say the first half of the year?
The first half of the reporting year, so.
We had one meeting
That was September.
in September that you're talking about.
We've
And
had
I-
more
I
than
would-
previous to that change.
Okay, it was, and it was this, the December meeting that we,
December meeting is when Michelle and you came to the first one.
and you
right,
shared-
and we had the whole debate about whether we should
Right.
be addressing EFAs at all, so I include that in what I'm calling the first half of the prior to the new year. Basically, we've not established that EFA issues were wholly excluded from, as far as, the supporting that population in their compliance and so on needs, was outside of our remit. We had not decided that yet. So in that first half of the year, we were either addressing the questions or debating whether we should address the questions. So I say the issue of EFAs, perhaps what I could say is issues surrounding EFAs. Which,
Yeah, that seems better.
That's better. Just
and
because
then,
we continue to have, even just now, Senator Ward bringing questions of 194F into
Absolutely.
this discussion.
Absolutely.
I would
And
suggest this meeting, we talk about the EFAs as much as we did in September.
talk about them all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and Senator Ward has solicited my ideas to tweak the EFA rules, which, you know, come on. You know, so no, it is outside of our remit to support that to advocate for that population, but it doesn't mean that it's not a major issue that we continue to talk about, probably will continue to talk.
Is it fair to say that Ruth is gone?
It
She's
appears so.
there. No, she's still there. She's
Oh,
just
she's just,
muted
her
on nobody.
her video is off. That's happened a couple times.
Okay.
Um,
So what's the relevance of that second sentence? Prior to December meeting, HEAC, how is it relevant to the board? How does that add value to us?
Well, it's sort of outlining, it's outlining, you know, pointing to a change in the way that we work. That prior to December, we've not, you know, I don't know last year what may or may not have been discussed but, you know, prior to the December meeting, there was no limiting rule on, you know, EFA support questions coming to this council, right? So that was a consequential change that happened in how the council worked, starting at the December meeting.
But we're still having that happen.
yeah,
Well, I don't think, so what we're not doing now is if somebody says, how do I apply for EFAs? How do I, you know, get what I need from class wallet for my EFAs, et cetera, those kinds of issues we're no longer willing to address. I think to the extent that we're discussing EFAs now, we're discussing it as what, you know, what is the home education, the 193A community's interest in, you know, or opinion or, you know, concerns regarding EFAs. So it's not that we stopped talking about them, but we stopped being a forum for supporting EFA.
I would like to suggest that, that if anyone were to go back and look at minutes from prior years, from last year, the year before, we were not sitting here talking about how you apply for EFAs. We were talking about home education issues.
Mhm.
And not occasionally, but we were always frustrated with the conflation of the two.
Mhm.
So yes, that came up in conversation, but we were not trying to facilitate people, you know, joining EFA. That just may be a perception from
Again, I wasn't.
your reading of that September meeting. I read the September meeting differently, even rewatching the video, but that's neither here nor there. It's one meeting, things happen in meetings. So I guess I object to I guess I agree, I don't see the need for this, and I think it could be reworded to show the continuity of the work that we're doing, and the continued efforts to address the confusion.
So what would you like to see removed? The second sentence in its entirety?
I think I would remove the first sentence or reword it. That's not,
Can I suggest something?
Yeah.
One of the things that I was hoping that we could add to this is perhaps an explanation of the difference between the pathways, and maybe, to just define homeschooling as it's a colloquial term. It is to let them know, to bring it to their attention, that that has been a crux of a lot of our meetings, that the perception and the wording are getting conflated. So if we change this paragraph to be more about that defining and the differences between the two and the visual pathways, and we take a different angle on this paragraph, then it might be more fruitful.
So it's not so much that you want to see something removed as you want to see content added around the definitional debate or the definitional discussion.
I don't think that we should be referencing what happened in one meeting as relevant to the rest of the paragraph.
I think there's probably a different way to write that whole first sentence that doesn't sound like our energy got absorbed by a negative thing pulling us down.
Okay, but we're not, again, we're not reporting to our boss here. Our energy has been absorbed by a negative thing. It continues to be. We spent half of today talking about EFAs. I mean, this is an accurate representation of what the Business Council is in the current period of history, right? You know, so to sort of to sort of elide that, that struggle, seems like we're not really reporting on what happened this year.
Right, which I think is where it's honest to say that the issue of EFAs being conflated with home education has absorbed a bulk of our time. But it's not that we have discussed directly EFA participation, right, but that those continued conflations have caused divisions and
Or that we just,
Question.
it sounds like we just sit here complaining because we want to. It's that these issues keep being brought to us that we have to keep defining.
So here's what it's saying. Let's see, we'll start off with definitions. The understanding of the HEAC that our remit is to support 193A, support and advocate for 193A unfunded traditional home education. We recognize that New Hampshire also has a second home-based pathway related to the EFAs, you know, governed by 194F. That's the first sentence definitions. The second sentence is issues surrounding conflation of 193A and 194F homeschooling have consumed a lot of our energy this year.
Fair, very fair.
Fair, and I agree with a lot of our energy, because I went through the minutes and there are a number of other things that we've done that
Sure,
we can
sure.
add in, so.
So the only suggestion I would make would be that first sentence. Just say, according to statute, what home education is defined as. When you start to get into the unfunded and you're doing another long list that's muddying the waters. I think it's really very easy. You've said it a couple places. There's two different paths, and one is statute that we're following. The other has statute that it should follow.
Last sentence, last paragraph.
Just a typo. About 3/4 of the way down, homeschooling movement and long-term threat. Should be long-term threat, there's an end there.
Yes.
There's also in the previous paragraph, you might end up changing it all anyway, but parallel is missing an
Yeah, I could call
A.
that.
Okay.
Are we on the fifth paragraph?
Yes.
Yes,
Fifth paragraph?
the final paragraph.
Final paragraph,
Sixth
that's the
paragraph.
sixth
Sixth,
paragraph.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would suggest, or I'd like you to consider. This rings of. Well, there's a stated right here, political advocacy. I don't believe that the responsibility of the HEAC is political advocacy. And while I understand that we all have our views and our strong opinions about these things, I don't feel comfortable signing on to something that says the council has concluded that the use of ESFAs is deleterious to the homeschooling movement. And we are resolved to resist any equivocation. I mean, I guess it could be in the wording, but
So I would say from the duties of the council
yeah.
section B2. Recommend to the Commissioner and State Board of Education desire to change the rules pertaining to home education. We are here to do political action. We are here to advocate for policy that we find advantageous to our constituent population. So I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that this council's a platform for political advocacy.
How do others feel about that part?
Could I make a plea for maybe a little less, this sounds very abrasive compared to the 5 preceding paragraphs. You just came up with a really great sentence that said, we continue to support members of the public in understanding and navigating the distinction between it. I mean, that sounds like positive change and positive direction. And it sounds a little harsh in the last paragraph. And this is gonna be the last one they read before they remember, what they'll remember. And I'd like them to remember that you're navigating it, even though it's been taking up a lot of your time.
Maybe rather than furthermore, however, extensive debate exists. Because it is still the purpose of this council to support solely 193A home education. And we have identified through various discussions that we have had that the EFA is a threat to home-based.
I don't wanna, I'm really
Threat's a-
hesitant with the
yeah,
use of the word
threat.
threat. That's a really strong word.
But it is a
It is a
threat,
threat.
It's not a threat to, 193A is not going anywhere.
but it's threatening what protections 193A
Right.
has. It's threatening how 193A is perceived in the community.
It's threatening
threatening
home
everything
education
about it.
as a institution, as a social phenomenon.
I don't think there's any other thing that's going, I don't think the arguments are too much different in most legislators' minds that between either kind, and they don't like either one. Because you are not in the system.
Right, the thing is that prior to EFAs, home education, schooling it's like a civil rights movement. No, the majority does not want us to be able to educate our own children according to, our values and ideals. We've won out, we're a minority who has won out the right to exercise a freedom that the majority would prefer us not to have. It's a civil rights movement. So with EFAs, then there is this portion of people who are educating their children at home who are receiving public money, which I think is an overreach. I think, by the school choice movement to try to include education in the home by the parents in something publicly funded like that. But the threat is to the minority civil rights protections that we've achieved over the previous 50 years. So it's very much like, some people would say that certain involvements, in other areas of civil rights, is government funding or is when something becomes official, does that weaken the moral stance of the people who were asking for a form of freedom or a form of liberation from government overreach. So that's the threat. The threat is that it erodes the case that we use to get to where we are. And it erodes the reputation that we have, and it invites this equivocation problem, where it also invites a form of critique where you say, well, let's say EFAs get loaded up with accountability measures to make sure those parents are on the up and up, and then at some point you make EFAs universal, and it's not simply an income thing. Am I suspect just because I don't want to take the money? Well, why don't you want all this extra scrutiny, Marcus? What's wrong with you? So this is
exactly
a threat to my civil right to educate my child.
That's exactly the same argument we got when home education started. You're not gonna take the public school education that we offer you? Why would you want to not participate in that?
Right.
So it is the same kind of argument, but now it's EFAs. Is it more fair to say it's the perception of the EFAs in conjunction with at home rather than in private school or something like that.
Right,
That's the threat, rather than
it is.
EFAs, the people taking EFAs and doing it at home, it's not the threat, it's what the perception of it is. It's there.
Well, I would say that. You have two legitimate claims here. You have a perfectly legitimate claim on the part of parents that. We don't need to ask the government's permission to educate our own children. We don't need the government's involvement to educate our own children. That's a civil rights argument. You have the perfectly legitimate argument on the behalf of the state that says if we're going to take public money and pay for something, we have the right to scrutinize that we're getting our money's worth. And that it's being, it's being used competently. That's completely legitimate argument too. The use of EFAs, not, specifically for education in the home by the parents. Causes us to come in conflict with that, which we should otherwise never need to be in conflict with that argument.
But in general, though, like we discussed already, is the EFA a proper mechanism to fund these people doing things at home? No, so the EFA intrinsically is a threat because it is being used as a mechanism for that.
EFA insofar as it applies, if you limited EFAs to private and parochial schools, it wouldn't be a threat to us personally, whether it's good policy or not.
I want to say that you have very strong opinions about this, and I value your opinions, and I value your perspective, and you as well, and perhaps others. What I would also say is that I don't believe in the past months that we've had a vigorous conversation about this as the HEAC, and that we've reached a group conclusion about this. We haven't had any motions, we haven't even had a dialogue that heard from people who may not believe the same thing. And so that's my objection to this really is that it's not that I think this is not right or that I think it's right. I just am not, I don't believe that this is something that we can convey as a group. That we've reached this conclusion as a group.
Okay.
Can I read something from last year? Last year's report, mass confusion. And this is just a different way of saying similar thing, okay? As popularity of home education grows and alternative schooling options become more customizable, there exists the need to facilitate communication among representatives of all forms of education. Members of HEAC frequently receive inquiries regarding the confusion surrounding the use of the EFA and seek guidance to clarify the distinctions, the differences between students being educated under RSA 194F and RSA 193A. It's essential for parents and education stakeholders to understand the legal requirements and the opportunities associated with each of these. Goes on to say a little bit more, but then it says, therefore, the council recommends that any education program, whether New Hampshire charter school program created by federal contractor money or other program of the state of New Hampshire that does not allow for these freedoms should not fall under RSA 193 home education. These programs rather that do not adhere to these principles should be categorized under alternative options to satisfy 193A compulsory attendance law. So to just to say it in a different way, to say it in a more positive way.
Well, I mean, yeah, I have very strong opinions, and I don't want to state the conflict in a positive way. I want to state that we've recognized there is a conflict.
Okay, then I go back to what Althea is saying.
I think
So
there,
we haven't, as a group, discussed that.
I would like to add that you want to present your case in the most positive light. And you're essentially presenting this to a group of people who you're seeking support from. And they could be 100% on your side, or they could be 100% against you. I would suggest you imagine a board of education that doesn't like homeschoolers at all and doesn't really care if EFAs are a threat, and they're not interested in protecting you. So saying that the EFA program is potentially a threat to the rights of home education, they might be happy to hear that. And I will also add that to Althea's point, I've spoken with a lot of members of the homeschool community, and they completely ignore this animosity that goes on. They decline to engage in Facebook groups that get riled up over the contention and differences between how you choose to educate your children at home. And this might do, a statement like this might be more harmful to people like that, who you're actually advocating for with your passion.
Hmm.
So it might be more helpful to tone down the passion and present this in the most positive light.
Well, I'm
So
happy to lose.
I
happy to
understand what
lose
you're,
the
saying,
last
but I understand
paragraph.
what you're saying, but I found, to be honest with you, one of the reasons I wanted to set up an appointment with you, with Representative Dry, was because between the last HEAC meeting and your passion came out in the last meeting, and this, I was very concerned about the direction that these meetings were going. And I thought that they needed to be toned down and keep homeschooling in a more positive light, because I have heard multiple legislators say that they're losing their sympathy to home educators because of this battle that they see going on. So you want to make this positive rather than a negative in reference to threats and deleterious. There's just very, very strongly negative used words in this that I would caution against.
I'm happy to remove the final paragraph. I do not want to rephrase it into some bureaucraties about working together and coordinating stakeholders, and because then we're really not saying anything. If we don't have a meeting of the minds in the council about, philosophically, what EFAs represent with respect to traditional homeschooling, then that's fine, and we don't have to take a position.
I think it's,
minority.
I think it's relevant though that there is something mentioned because it was already in the 23-24 report and it was ignored.
I have some edits that might be like an in-between.
Mhm.
Furthermore, through extensive debate and public comment during the latter part of this reporting year, the council has been made aware that the use of EFAs for home-based education poses a potential long-term threat to the rights of home education families to be left alone. That part's not right, not done yet, but like, it should sort of state what rights you're talking about, the rights to not have additional government oversight. The HEAC will continue to be vigilant to protect those rights and resolve to resist any equivocation between home education and public education in the home going forward.
Don't call it public education.
Public education in the home, okay, well, whatever, I like
Any other,
any equivocation between home education and
all other
Yeah.
compulsory education pathways.
I like your idea, if you drop the last paragraph and you have this, we're continuing to support everybody understanding the distinction and supporting the continued rights of home educators to educate, as they have been, something like that. Because that, to me, the important thing here is that you guys have clearly seen who you're responsible to
Mhm.
and what you're defending.
Well, and this is why I made the brought the calendar into it prior to the December meeting. Because it was for the prior year's business, we're addressing, we're not sure who our constituency is. It was in the September meeting, we're not sure who our constituency is, starting with the December meeting, this being the major tonal change in the HEAC this year was what you're saying. We settled on an understanding that under statute, we have this constituency and no other.
So I don't think it's this organization's business to talk about what the legislature does with a different kind of funding for education, just like you wouldn't be making discussion about what we would do for private schools. Just turn your focus to this, and our responsibility is, what we've seen from the discussion is that our responsibility is here. And this is that's what we're working on.
Our responsibility to protect is here, but the conflation exists.
Yeah, but it could be in any other, right now it's that one, it could be something else down the line, I don't know that it's. We're looking at you being inward looking at acknowledging that there is an outward thing, but it's not really your place to advocate for change in those
Well,
areas.
we have in our remit to have policy opinions.
Okay.
And I don't know of any other
I
Any
don't
other
see that.
ordinance
Where is it saying that you can have policy opinions or that you can?
recommending to the Commission and State Board of Education desired changes in rules pertaining to home education? That's policy. We're allowed to advocate for
That's
policy.
rules.
That's rules, that's the rules, not.
They're not policy.
Diana Marcus, I just wanted to note that Senator Ward has
Thank you.
dropped out.
Okay, and it is past 4:30.
It is past
Typically, we
4:30.
take a vote or make a motion to see if we can extend the meeting, if people can do it or not. It's up to you, just FYI.
Okay.
I don't usually wear pearls to a meeting. I wore that because I have to go to a pregnancy center banquet. And it will be just right on time if I go now, because I'm sponsoring a table.
All right, so I don't think we're going to extend, so I will motion to adjourn and we will continue this. We will meet in June and continue this discussion.
Can I make a suggestion? We had two members of the public signed in. And just see if they had some public comment.
We have to finish the motion.
Comment is time allowing, is it not?
Extending their time allowed is what was optional. Allowing them to speak was not.
Can we close out the report? You are making a motion to what?
Table the, well, I will make an edit of the report discussion between now and the following, with our current comments. But, you know, to table the question of adopting the report until a June meeting. And in the same motion, we will meet in June.
And you'll send the draft to us again, like you said, this one?
Exactly.
Seconding that motion?
I second. Michelle Rosenberg.
Okay, and let's go roll call. Rebecca Anderson,
Yes. What am I?
Althea Barton.
What word am I supposed to say?
Diane Nolan, yes. James O'Rourke,
Yes.
Michelle Rohrabacher.
Yes.
Marcus Zwick,
Yes,
thank you.
all right. Public comments?
It's fine, I'm happy to email a statement and they'll be included in the minutes for next time, so it's just in.
And we will, any statement you email will be included in the agenda.
Okay.
for the next meeting.
I'm happy
And
to do that.
is it?
That's, take that.
Okay,
Do we have any public comments on the Zoom meeting? Public commenters? Okay.
See.
we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a comment here.
Oh, we have a
Angela.
comment on.
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
She says, I agree that hello, sorry. I agree that the EFA is a threat, but the word threat is too strong for the report.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Any other comments on Zoom? We have a motion to adjourn. Second. Anybody?
Who motions?
James,
James motion.
I got James seconded.
I seconded it.
Oh, okay.
Marcus motion, James second.
Marcus motion, James second. All right, Rebecca Anderson,
Yes.
Althea Barton,
Yes.
Diane Nolan, yes. James O'Rourke,
Yes.
Michelle Rohrabacher.
Yes.
Marcus Zwick.
yes.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great